He holds the record for the fastest yellow card in history, 3 seconds. He grabbed Paul Gascoigne by the testicles and squeezed until the genius screamed. The Football Association didn't just hate Vinnie Jones, they were terrified of him. They fined him a record-breaking £20 000. They threatened a lifetime ban. But they learned a hard lesson. You cannot tame a monster who treats a football match like a street fight. Was he a thug or a genius of intimidation? Today, the dark side of football exposes why the most powerful organization in sport was completely powerless against a former bricklayer. To truly understand the legend of Vinnie Jones, to understand the raw, unpolished, and terrifying energy he brought to the English game, we have to look away from the floodlights. We have to look past the FA Cup final at Wembley, past the Hollywood suits, and go back to where it all began. We need to go back to the mud, the freezing cold mornings, and the sheer breaking weight of reality. You see, modern football is often a story of academies, manicured pitches, and young prodigies protected from the world. But Vinnie Jones was forged in a fire that most modern players wouldn't survive. Before he was the psycho of Wimbledon, before he was the leader of the crazy gang, he held a title that commanded zero glory but demanded absolute grit. He was a hod carrier. For those who don't know, a hod carrier isn't just a construction worker. It is one of the most physically punishing jobs a man can do. Picture this. It is 1980s England. The economy is tough, the skies are gray, and the air is biting cold. While the future stars of the Premier League are sleeping in warm beds, Vinnie Jones is awake at 5:00 a.m. He isn't stretching for a training session. He is preparing for 10 hours of hell. On the High Performance podcast, Vinnie stripped away the myth to reveal the man underneath. He recalled those days with a haunting clarity. He spoke of waking up before the sun, his body already screaming from the day before. He would spend his entire day balancing a hod, a V-shaped wooden trough on his shoulder. And inside that hod, bricks, wet cement, heavy, unforgiving stone. He would climb ladders up and down hour after hour, carrying tons of weight on his back, all for a wage of 150 pounds a week. His hands were calloused, torn, and permanently stained with the dust of the building site. His back was constantly aching, a dull throb that never really went away. This was his life, and it was this life that created the monster we saw on the pitch. When Vinnie finally stepped onto the grass on Saturday afternoons, he didn't look across the halfway line and see fellow athletes. He didn't see colleagues. He told us exactly what he saw. He looked at the polished, clean-cut players on the other team, the ones with soft hands and expensive haircuts, and he thought, I am going to eat you alive. For Vinnie, football wasn't a game. It wasn't sports entertainment. It was a desperate, violent escape. Every tackle, every shoulder barge, every terrifying glare was fueled by a singular primal fear, the fear of going back to the hod. He looked at the opposition and realized they were the only thing standing between him and that construction site. They were the obstacle preventing him from escaping a life of breaking his back for pocket change. And that made him dangerous in a way that no amount of football training could teach. So when you ask why Vinnie Jones was so hard, why he played with such ferocity that he became a symbol of fear, the answer is simple. How can you possibly intimidate a man who has carried mountains of bricks on his shoulders? How can a slide tackle scare a man who knows the pain of a 10-hour shift in the freezing rain? To Vinnie Jones, the physical contact of football wasn't violence. Compared to the hod, a kick from an opponent was nothing. It was just a mosquito bite. The pitch was his paradise, and he was willing to go to war to keep it. Because for the hod carrier, this wasn't just football. It was survival. If the first chapter of Vinnie Jones's story was about survival, this chapter is about dominance. Absolute psychological dominance. To understand the magnitude of this moment, we have to travel back to February 6th, 1988. The setting is St. James Park. The air is electric. But this wasn't just a match between Newcastle United and Wimbledon. This was a collision of two different worlds. On one side, you had Paul Gascoigne, Gazza. At that time, Gazza wasn't just a player, he was the golden boy of English football. He was a generational talent, a prodigy with feet that danced like a ballerina and a smile that charmed the entire nation. He was joy personified. He could dribble through a minefield and come out with the ball glued to his toe. He was untouchable. And on the other side, waiting in the shadows, was Vinnie Jones. The crazy gang had a plan that day. They knew they couldn't outplay Gazza. If you gave him space, if you let him breathe, he would destroy you. So the manager didn't give Vinnie a tactical diagram. He gave him a hit list. The instruction was simple, brutal, and non-negotiable. Do not let him play. From the moment the whistle blew, Vinnie shadowed Gazza like a dark cloud. He didn't look at the ball. He didn't care about the score. His eyes were locked onto the young superstar. Every time Gazza turned, Vinnie was there, breathing down his neck, stepping on his toes, nudging his ribs. But then came the moment that would be frozen in time forever. The moment that became the most iconic photograph in the history of British football hardmen. It happened during a pause in play, a set piece. The referee was distracted looking elsewhere. In the modern game with VAR and 40 cameras covering every angle, this would be an instant red card and a 10-match ban. But in 1988, it was the Wild West. Vinnie didn't go for a tackle. He didn't throw a punch. He did something far more terrifying. He reached back, his face twisted into a mask of pure aggression, and he grabbed Paul Gascoigne by the testicles. And he didn't just grab, he squeezed with the strength of a man who used to carry bricks for a living. Look at that famous photo again. Really look at it. It is a masterpiece of agony and intimidation. You see Vinnie, teeth-gritted eyes, wild, looking like a man possessed. And then you see Gaza. The scream on his face isn't just pain, though there was plenty of that. It is pure, unadulterated shock. It is the face of a young man realizing that the rules of the game no longer apply. But the physical pain was only half the weapon. It was what Vinnie whispered, or rather growled, into Gaza's ear that truly broke him. Years later, Gascoigne recounted the horror of that intimate exchange. As Vinnie held him in that vice-like grip, he leaned in and delivered a monologue that sounds like something out of a gangster movie. Vinnie hissed, "I'm Vinnie Jones. I'm a gypsy. I'm going to bite your ear off and spit it in the hole. You're mine, fat boy." It was grotesque. It was absurd. But most importantly, it was effective. In that split second, the Geordie genius vanished. Gaza, the man who could humiliate defenders with a drop of the shoulder, was reduced to a frightened child. He wasn't thinking about scoring goals anymore. He was thinking about his ears. He was thinking about his safety. He was wondering if this madman was actually going to kill him right there on the pitch. The psychological victory was total. After the match, the story took a turn that perfectly summarizes the power dynamic. In the safety of the changing rooms, you might expect Gaza to be furious to demand justice. Instead, he did something that signaled total surrender. He sent a rose to the Wimbledon dressing room, a flower. It was a peace offering. It was a white flag. It was a gesture that said, "You won, please just leave me alone." Vinnie, in return, sent him a toilet brush, a classic piece of crazy gang humor, reminding him exactly where he belonged in the pecking order that day. This incident, this Gascoigne grab, transcends the sport. It asks a fundamental question about competition. We love to romanticize skill. We love the dribblers, the scorers, the artists. But Vinnie Jones proved something dark that afternoon in Newcastle. He proved that technique is fragile. He proved that you can take the most talented player in the world, a man who can do things with a football that defy physics, and you can render him useless without ever touching the ball. How? By introducing fear. Gaza could dribble past 5 defenders. He could curl a free kick into the top corner from 30 yards out, but he couldn't dribble past a man who was holding his future children in a vice grip. He couldn't outplay a man who had already decided that the result of the match mattered less than the destruction of his opponent. That photo is legendary not because it is violent, but because it is honest. It captures the exact second when the artist met the enforcer and the artist blinked. Vinnie Jones didn't just win the ball that day. He stole Gaza's soul for 90 minutes. And he did it with a grip that the world would never forget. The year is 1992. It is a watershed moment in the history of British sport. Football was changing. The rough, muddy working-class game of the past was shedding its skin. The First Division was becoming the Premier League. Sky Sports had arrived with its fireworks, its cheerleaders, and its promise to turn football into a sanitized, family-friendly product. The suits in London wanted to sell a clean, polished spectacle to the world. They wanted heroes. They wanted role models. And then crashing through the door like a battering ram came Vinnie Jones with a VHS tape. While the Football Association was busy trying to polish the game's image, Vinnie released a video titled "Soccer's Hard Men." To call it a highlight reel would be a lie. It was a manifesto. It was an instructional manual on the dark arts of the game. In an era before the internet, before YouTube compilations, this grainy VHS tape became a piece of contraband passed around by fans in pubs and schoolyards. It felt forbidden. And that's because in many ways it was. In the video, Vinnie didn't just show clips of hard tackles. He narrated them with the pride of a craftsman explaining his tools. He sat there looking straight into the camera lens and taught the youth of England how to hurt people. He explained the subtle mechanics of violence. He broke down the tricks of the trade that the referees never saw. He talked about how to pull an opponent's hair when going up for a header to throw them off balance. He demonstrated how to rake your studs down a defender's Achilles tendon while pretending to stumble. He detailed the psychological warfare of whispering threats and stepping on toes during a corner kick. But there was one line in that video that became the tagline for his entire career. A line that stripped away all the pretense of fair play and exposed the brutal reality of the lower leagues from which he came. Vinnie looked at the camera and said, "If you can't get the ball, get the man." It was a simple philosophy. It was the law of the jungle. But to the Football Association, it was a declaration of war. The backlash was instant and furious. Graham Kelly, the chief executive of the FA at the time, didn't just criticize the video, he condemned it. He called it a disgrace to the game. To the establishment, Vinnie Jones wasn't just a rogue player anymore. He was a cancer growing on the sport they were trying to sell. He was promoting anarchy. The FA decided they had to make an example of him. They had to crush this rebellion before it spread. They summoned Vinnie to a disciplinary hearing that felt more like a criminal trial. The atmosphere was icy. The men in the oak-paneled room with their ties and their rulebooks looked down at the hod carrier with disdain. They hit him with everything they had. They slapped him with a fine of £20,000. You have to remember, in 1992, £20,000 was an astronomical amount of money for a footballer. It was a world record fine at the time. It was enough to buy a house in some parts of the country. Along with the fine, they dangled the threat of a 6-month ban, a suspension that could effectively end a player's career. The goal of the FA was clear. They wanted contrition. They wanted Vinnie to bow his head, apologize to the public, and admit that he was wrong. They wanted to break his spirit and show the world that the system always wins. But this is where the story shifts from a legal battle to a study in helplessness. Not Vinnie's helplessness, but the FA's. Vinnie Jones did not apologize. He did not beg. He did not show a shred of remorse. He looked at the fine, shrugged his shoulders, and essentially said, "Is that it?" Vinnie paid the money. He accepted the punishment. And then he went right back out onto the pitch and played exactly the same way. In fact, he played harder. He turned the notoriety of the video into a personal brand. He became the villain the crowds loved to hate. At that moment, a terrifying realization washed over the executives at the Football Association. They realized they were powerless. You see, systems of authority rely on shame. They rely on the idea that people want to be good, that they want to be respected by society, that they fear being cast out. The red card, the suspension, the fine, these are designed to correct behavior. They are designed to say, "You are bad, stop doing that." But what do you do with a man who doesn't care about being good? What do you do with a man who wears his villainy like a suit of armor? The FA had the power, they had the laws, they had the referees, and they had the moral high ground. But they had absolutely no way to stop a man who viewed a red card not as a punishment, but as a badge of honor. To Vinnie, the fine was just a business expense. The criticism was just free marketing. That moment in 1992 proved something profound about the nature of control. You can sanitize the stadiums, you can put seats in the terraces, and you can sell TV rights for billions. But you cannot regulate the human spirit of aggression. Vinnie Jones stood in the center of that storm, £20,000 poorer, but infinitely more powerful. He had looked the law in the eye and blinked last. And as the suits in Lancaster Gate fumed in their offices, Vinnie was likely already planning his next tackle, proving that while you can punish the body, you cannot govern a man who has no fear of consequences. How do you threaten a man who has already accepted that he is the bad guy? The answer, as the FA found out, is that you can't. You just have to watch him burn the rulebook page by page. As the 1990s bled into the new millennium, the football pitches of England began to change irrevocably. The mud was replaced by pristine hybrid turf. The black boots were replaced by neon pink ones. The game was becoming faster, richer, and frankly softer. The laws of the game were rewritten to protect the asset, the players. Tackles that once earned a round of applause were now earning straight red cards. The era of the hard man was dying, suffocated by the new corporate image of the Premier League. Vinnie Jones, a creature of the old world, looked around and realized he was a dinosaur in the age of the meteor. The game had become too clean for his hands. But Vinnie didn't wait to be pushed out. He didn't wait to fade into obscurity in the lower leagues. He did the unexpected. He walked off the pitch and onto a movie set. When Guy Ritchie cast Vinnie in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, the critics laughed. They thought it was a gimmick. A footballer trying to act. It was a joke. But when the camera rolled, the laughter stopped. As Big Chris, the debt collector, Vinnie didn't have to pretend. He didn't need method acting. He simply channeled that same terrifying aura he had used to paralyze Paul Gascoigne years before. He slammed car doors on heads with the same conviction he used to slam into midfielders. The transition was seamless because in a way Vinnie had been acting the role of the villain his entire career. Hollywood didn't ask him to change. It asked him to be exactly who he was. This is the ultimate irony of Vinnie Jones's life, and this is where he claims his final undeniable victory over the establishment. Think about it. The Football Association spent years trying to suppress him. They fined him. They banned him. They called him a disgrace. They told him that his brand of aggression had no place in civilized society. They tried to bankrupt him morally and financially. And what happened? Vinnie Jones took that exact same reputation, the violence, the intimidation, the bad boy image that the FA loathed, and he sold it to the world for millions of dollars. The very traits that made him a pariah in the FA headquarters made him a superstar in Los Angeles. While the suits at the FA were busy sanitizing the sport, Vinnie was starring in blockbusters alongside Brad Pitt, Sylvester Stallone, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was flying first class, wearing tailored suits, and living a life that the good boys of football could only dream of. Vinnie Jones beat the system in the most spectacular way possible. He proved that you don't have to conform to win. The establishment wanted to erase him from history, to scrub him out like a stain on the carpet. But in their attempt to villainize him, they accidentally created an icon. Today, when we look back at the sterilized, ultra-safe world of modern football, we feel a strange pang of nostalgia for the chaos of Vinnie Jones. We miss the danger. He remains the ultimate outlaw. He walked through the fire, took the money, kept his soul, and laughed all the way to the bank. The FA tried to break a hod carrier, but all they did was chisel out a Hollywood star. Vinnie Jones didn't just survive the game, he conquered the world. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the last laugh.